back. Kristen?
Yes, Fred. As a matter of fact, I am standing here with the nephew of O.J. Simpson. His name is Benny Baker, Jr. You're the son of Shirley Baker, who is O.J.'s sister, and you have been here at court on a number of occasions with your mother, who's been here every day. Share with us the thoughts and feelings of your family in these moments before the verdict is going to be read.
Well, we're cautiously optimistic. The jury came back rather suddenly, so it caught us all by surprise. We're cautiously optimistic, and it's a sad situation for the Brown and the Goldman family, and I don't think there are any winners here, no matter what the outcome is today, because O.J.'s already lost. You know, all of our families have lost, so we're hoping we can salvage the rest of his life.
Do you feel any anger towards the Goldmans or the Browns because of the position that they have taken in this case, or what is the relationship between your family and the Browns?
Having never experienced a tragic death in my family like that, I can only imagine what they feel like and what they go through, so I can't hold any animosity or hard feelings toward them. I'm just glad that it's not one of my siblings or a child of mine.
But do you understand why they and why a lot of Americans, according to the polls, believe that O.J. Simpson is responsible for these killings?
I don't understand why the fact, I don't understand the fact that he has not been presumed innocent until proven guilty.
I'm going to have to let it go at that because I'm told, Fred, we need to go back to you. There may be starting in the courtroom.
All right, we've been told that the media and others are being allowed to file into the courtroom and take their places. We probably do have a few moments. O.J. Simpson has not yet been brought into the courtroom. Judge Ito, who always comes last, has not taken his place. It's a familiar scenario, and as you know, then there may be a few moments and then the jury will be called for. One issue I want to talk with our guests about, Art Danner. Listen, I don't know, you might still be pretty nervous if you're on either side of this case because someone may have changed their mind on that jury.
Anytime you are involved with any kind of a trial, you want to take the verdict as soon as you can, because I've been involved with cases when they poll the jurors where jurors have changed their minds. And here, the overnight stay, you never know. And so from the standpoint of the trial lawyers, they wish they took the verdict yesterday.
Tim, how about that for the defense side?
Well, from the defense side, usually if there's a change of heart, it's usually in your direction. So it might be more likely that you might not want to rush and take it. Because if it's a conviction, it's more likely you might have reservations about it than if it's an acquittal. That tends to be something that people feel more strongly about sometimes.
I want to ask Ricky something here. Ricky, do you have any feelings at all about what Kristen reported earlier, and that was that there was a celebration of sorts among the jurors last night?
Well, I think, Fred, we have to look at the celebration of the jurors being from what you talked about earlier, and that is the difficulty of being sequestered for 9 months. That these jurors, regardless of their verdict, must feel an enormous sense of relief that this is over. But the conventional wisdom would say that if they're celebrating, the logic is that they're celebrating a guilty verdict, because there might be something thought unseemly about a celebration when you were going to say that you were going to go back to the community and see what were the feelings of the people around you.
Either one of you two gentlemen have any sense of what might possibly be done about this sequestration problem in these long, high visibility cases? Art?
Well, I'll tell you, it's very rare that it happens, and in California, we've experienced all kinds of cases, and we just rarely do it. And this was, of course, an unusual case, and had everything in the world in it to say, hey, maybe you should sequester jurors. But I think it's made a definite impact, and I would suspect from here on out, we're going to see a lot of work on trying to get rid of the issue of sequestration.
You know, in the Oklahoma bombing case, the judge has told the competing lawyers he will not sequester those jurors, and he said, you all figure out how to do it. But now, Tim, I don't know any way to do it. Do you, in a highly publicized case?
No, I mean, I think you gotta sequester jurors. We live in an age where there's tabloid TV, there's lots and lots of media. They're gonna go look through the jurors' garbage, they're gonna find them. You're never gonna even get to a verdict. In most cases, the jurors are gonna be disqualified by the activity of some of the lower level media outlets. And so I think you gotta worry about their conduct which will contravene, the demand for a story will contravene the interests of justice.
Well, now, Ricky, if you were one of those defense lawyers and the judge said, look, you just figure out a way, what way is there?
Well, in terms of sequestration, Fred, you know I'm a big opponent of sequestration. I think it is bad. I think it's bad for the psychological health of the jurors. I think the pressure is too great for them, and I think it's bad for the system. But since that's my personal feeling...
Pardon me, I'm going to have to interrupt you because Judge Lance Speedo has taken his place. We go live into the courtroom.
All right, back on the record in the Simpson matter. Mr. Simpson is again present before the court with his counsel, Mr. Shapiro, Mr. Cochran, Mr. Kardashian, Mr. Bailey, Mr. Blazier. People are represented by Ms. Clark, Mr. Darden, and Mr. Hodgman. The jury is not present. Good morning, counsel. All right, the record should reflect that earlier this morning at 9 o'clock, the court met informally with counsel here in the courtroom because there are too many lawyers to go into chambers this morning for the purposes of discussing notifications to the jurors regarding their rights of privacy and the interest of the news media to interview them or speak to them following the delivery of the verdict in court here today. The court distributed to the parties copies of the questionnaire that has been distributed to the jurors, and also the notice to them regarding confidentiality under 237 of the Code of Civil Procedure. And those two questionnaires have been returned by the jurors. They have uniformly indicated their desire that their private information will remain confidential. They have also indicated to the court unanimously a desire not to speak to the attorneys after the conclusion of the trial, and not to speak with the news media either. All right, counsel, is there anything else we need to take up before I invite the jurors to join us? All right, Deputy Trower, let's have the jurors, please.
And we've heard the judge say that the jurors unanimously do not want to speak to the media. What does that say to you?
Well, I think that it's said to all three of us, as all three of us echo the thought that it sounds like it may be a guilty verdict. That is, they don't want to talk to the lawyers, they don't want to talk to the media, they want to go home. But we've been wrong before, Fred, with predictions that have no basis in fact.
What's the problem? There's a problem there if they're not willing to speak to the lawyers either. You learn a lot that way, don't you, Art?
You do. Many times in talking to the jurors, you find out where the strength and weaknesses were, and that helps you in other cases, or if, of course, if it's ever a retrial. So, I mean, there's just a lot to be learned there. So you lose a lot in that respect.
Tim? What do you think? Do you learn from that?
Well, you certainly learn from that, but I think what you learn from this is that the jury is fed up with the parties. I think that's what it means here.
You know, of course, we don't know the outcome here, but from the standpoint of the media, particularly if there is an acquittal in this case, it's very important to speak to some jurors, and I think for the good of the public, if there is an acquittal in this case. Now, Ricky, it seems to me the public is going to want to know, and really they have a right to know if there is an acquittal, and to a certain extent if he's found guilty.
Well, I think the public does want to know. I'm not so sure they have a right to know because the jurors do have their privacy.
We need to go back into the courtroom. Apparently the jury is in place.
We have now been rejoined by all the members of our jury panel and our alternates. Good morning again, ladies and gentlemen. All right, Madam Foreperson, would you please open the envelope and check the condition of the verdict forms? All right, Madam Foreperson, you've had the opportunity to review the verdict forms.
Yes.
Are they the same forms that you signed, and are they in order? All right, would you hand those, please, to Deputy Trevor? And you have signed and dated those verdict forms indicating the jury's verdict? All right, thank you. All right, ladies and gentlemen and of the jury, I'm going to ask that you carefully listen to the verdicts as they are being read by the clerk, Mrs. Robertson. As after the verdicts have been read, you will be asked if these are your verdicts. And I would caution the audience during the course of the reading of these verdicts to remain calm, and that if there is any disruption during the reading of the verdicts, the bailiffs will have the obligation to remove any persons disrupting these proceedings. All right, Mrs. Robertson. All right, Mr. Simpson, would you please stand and face the jury?
Found Simpson, a human being, as charged in count 1 of the information. Superior Court of the State of California, County of Los Angeles, in the matter of the people of the State of California versus Orenthal James Simpson. We, the jury, in the above entitled action, find the defendant, Orenthal James, as charged in count 2 of the information. We, the jury, in the above entitled action, further find the special circumstance that the defendant, Orenthal James Simpson, has in this case been convicted of at least one crime of murder of the first degree and one or more crimes of murder of the first or second degree to be not true. Signed this second day of October 1995, Juror 230. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, is this your verdict? So say you one, so say you all.
All right, counsel, Mr. Simpson, would you be seated, please? Let's have it quiet in the courtroom, please.
1, is this your verdict? Juror number 3, as to count 1, is this your verdict? Juror number 4, as to count 1, is this your verdict?
Yes.
Juror number 5, as to count 1, is this your verdict? Yes. Juror number 6, as to count 1, is this your verdict? Yes. Juror number 7, as to count 1, is this your verdict? Yes. Juror number 8, as to count 1, is this your verdict? Yes. Juror number 9, as to count 1, is this your verdict? Yes. Juror number 10, as to count 1, is this your verdict? Yes. Juror number 11, as to count 1, is this your verdict? Juror number 12, as to count 1, is this your verdict? Okay, count 2. Juror number 1, as to count 2, is this your verdict? Yes. Juror number 2, as to count 2, is this your verdict? Yes. Juror number 3, as to count 2, is this your verdict? Juror number 4, as to count 2, is this your verdict? Yes. Juror number 5, as to count 2, is this your verdict? Yes. Juror number 6, as to count 2, is this your verdict? Yes. Juror number 7, as to count 2, is this your verdict? Yes. Juror number 8, as to count 2, is this your verdict? Yes. Juror number 9, as to count 2, is this your verdict? Yes. Juror number 10, as to count 2, is this your verdict? Yes. Juror number
is directed to record the verdicts as read. The parties agree to waive reading of the verdicts as recorded. Mr. Cochran, do you waive reading of the verdicts as recorded? Yes, we do. Ms. Clark. Thank you. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I want to at this time take this opportunity to publicly thank you for the service that you've given to us. The burdens that we've placed upon you were enormous, and words can't begin to express the debt that we owe to you for the time and patience and exertion that you've given to us during the course of this case. I will have an opportunity to meet with you privately later, and I'll give you my private comments when we have a chance to meet. I want to caution you at this time that there is, as you know, intense media interest in this case. The news media will probably seek you out at your home or at your place of business. And I would implore that the news media act responsibly to avoid harassing you or identifying you without your consent or otherwise causing you concern. Whether you wish to cooperate with the news media is, of course, entirely up to you. However, I must warn you to expect the worst as far as that is concerned. We want to, I know I share with you in expressing our thanks to the bailiffs from the Sheriff's Department, to our court reporters, Ms. Moxham and Ms. Olson, to the research attorney, John Byrne, who's assisted us, our Pepperdine law clerks, Mr. Golub and Ms. Carswell, our media liaison, Jerry Ann Hazlett, and her staff, and of course the jury commissioner, Gloria Gomez, and her staff. All right, counsel, is there anything we need to take up before we excuse the jurors? Mr. Cochran?
One last time.
And as you can see, the attorneys have moved to the bench, and we are now looking at the Goldman family. Fred Goldman, you see there. There were some tears within the family there of the victims when the verdict was read. I want to ask Tim Chandler, you're a defense lawyer. Is O.J. Simpson about to walk right out of there, or are there formalities here?
Well, all right, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I am now going to excuse you from further service on this case. As you know, this does absolve you from your vows of silence. You may take with you your juror notebooks as you have requested, and we'll be chatting with you shortly. All right, thank you very much, and I'll see you all later. All right. Everybody have a seat, please.
Have a seat, please.
All right, Ms. Clark, Mr. Cochran, anything else we need to take up? Ms. Clark?
Thank you.
All right, the defendant having been acquitted of both charges, he is ordered transported to an appropriate sheriff's facility and released forthwith. All right, we'll stand in recess.
And the stunning outcome, it would have been stunning either way it went. It certainly was stunning as it was. The obvious elation on the face of O.J. Simpson. He immediately embraced his lead counsel, Johnny Cochran. The things that we saw in the courtroom were what you would expect. Shocked, dismayed, visages on the side of the prosecution, and obvious elation on the side of the defense. Ricky Kleeman, we've been here now for 9 months following this, and now that you see the outcome, aside from the fact that it came so swiftly, what's your reaction?
Well, I think that my reaction is that...
I've never seen you almost speechless, Ricky.
Well, I'm looking at my hands, Fred, and they are as soaking wet as if it had been a verdict that I was on either side. And I think it comes from the emotional content, perhaps, of a background of being a trial lawyer. These moments are never easy, no matter how they go. And as we were sitting out here, as soon as that verdict came in, whoever transported that news to the people outside in front of the courthouse, you could hear the cheers, the screaming and the yelling, the support of O.J. Simpson. And once again, I think it's interesting to see how wrong often the analysts are, including many of us, which is the fact that because of the Alan Clark readback, so many of us thought about the fact that it was such a good witness for the prosecution. And what I found interesting was criminal defense lawyer friends of mine with whom I had dinner last night from the greater Los Angeles area the considered wisdom of all of the media seemed to be that it looked like a guilty verdict, but they held fast and they said, no, a fast verdict with all of this evidence could only mean a not guilty. And when you had asked earlier about the jurors celebrating, I think what I said and got twisted in my saying is that it would have been unseemly for jurors to celebrate if they had convicted someone of first-degree murder and he was going to go to jail, to prison for the rest of his life. So that the reaction of their celebration may have been release from sequestration, but certainly the fact that they felt that they had done justice and was returning someone to the community and his family. One interesting thought I have before you canvass the rest of us is the look in the courtroom at the emotion of Robert Kardashian. Of all of the lawyers on the defense side, the one who expressed his emotion most openly. And of course, we know that Robert Kardashian was not only a lawyer in this case, he was a very close friend of Mr. Simpson's. And many of these lawyers have said privately to me, lawyers who I've known for years as colleagues, who represented O.J. Simpson, that they 100% believe that he was not guilty, just like he said at his arraignment.
All right, now, of course, we've been out here for 9 months for the majority of that time. Greg Jarrett was out here anchoring the coverage. Greg is now standing by in New York. And Greg, I'd be very interested in what your reaction is to all this.
Well, Fred, I have to say I'm not surprised, and maybe that is due in large part to my background. I grew up not far from that courthouse. I tried some cases in Los Angeles. I watched my father try cases in the old criminal courts building, which is now Camp OJ. And one thing I learned throughout the many years is that downtown jurors are different. They view life and people and police in a very different way than other people do, which is not necessarily negative. Perhaps they have a better grasp of reality and truth and justice than anybody else. It's not for me to say, and maybe nobody else to say. They have decided this case based, I think, on their view of the evidence in light of their own personal experiences. This was, in the end, a police case, and they just didn't trust police. The defense gave them a reason, perhaps, to be skeptical of police, to doubt the trust and credibility of one particular police officer, which may have tainted them all.
Well, obviously, the prosecution was visibly devastated when we glimpsed them there in the courtroom. Dan Abrams has been covering the prosecution side throughout this case, and he's standing by now over at the courthouse. Dan.
Well, Fred, I was just inside the courtroom, and I can tell you that the only sounds you could hear inside that courtroom were people sobbing. On both sides of the aisle, you heard Arnell Simpson and Jason Simpson sobbing loudly before the verdict was rendered and after it was rendered as well. They were embracing tightly. Of course, the entire Goldman family, all 5 of them, Patty, the stepmother of Ron Goldman, in addition to Fred Goldman, the father, and Kim Goldman, the sister, and Patty's 2 children, all sobbing loudly in the front row. You saw a number of members of the media crying. 2 of the jurors appeared to be crying. Juror number 3, a white woman sitting in the first row's nose had become red. Her eyes were red as well. And juror number 7, a woman who I've seen in that courtroom cry on one instance before, appeared to be crying as well as they heard the Goldmans sobbing inside that courtroom. As soon as the verdict was rendered, the Goldmans walked out, and you heard Fred Goldman mutter under his breath, "Murderer." And then the Browns followed the Goldmans out of that courtroom after immediately the verdict had been rendered. Philip Van Adder, one of the lead detectives, was staring at the jury immediately after the verdict, almost trance-like, for about 15 to 20 seconds right after the verdict had been read. O.J. Simpson, as he was walking out of the courtroom, was turning around, and it appeared to be sneering at the prosecution and people at the other end of the table. I mean, Fred, I can go on and on. This was an incredibly emotional moment inside that courtroom because all you could hear were cries and sobs from both sides. Eunice Simpson, the mother of O.J. Simpson, crying as well, tears in her eyes, wiping away tears with tissues. You had the entire family, Goldman family there, the entire Brown family there, the entire Simpson family there, and that took up just about all of the seats inside that courtroom. Before the verdict was rendered, there was complete silence except for a few sobs coming from Arnell and Jason Simpson. O.J. Simpson entered the courtroom and smiled over at his family, the way he does on every other occasion, as if this were no different. But you could tell, once O.J. Simpson stood up, that there was a different look on his face. This was clearly a different day. Security was beefed up inside that courtroom significantly. There was a court officer on both sides of the jury box, usually only on one side. There were about 8 members of the prosecution's investigators standing as we walked inside that courtroom, all examining who was walking into the courtroom. All the attorneys looked very nervous as the proceedings began. Marcia Clark and Chris Darden were talking to one another quietly, as was Robert Shapiro, Robert Cardassian, and Johnny Cochran. Before O.J. Simpson walked out, Johnny Cochran led the procession with Robert Cardassian right behind him, and Robert Shapiro looking surprisingly grim with O.J. Simpson then following him. This, of course, is before the verdict was rendered. And so, Fred, all I can say is that when you see this many journalists crying inside a courtroom, there's something very powerful going on.
Dan Abrams, thank you very much. I know you want to do some reporting over there, and so we'll release you for now. Of course, we'll be coming back to you periodically as our coverage continues throughout the day. One of the things that Judge Lance Ito did is something that we don't see that often in a case in which a defendant is acquitted. Quite often, that defendant simply walks right out the door, goes out the front door of the courthouse, and goes home. Now, this is done in different ways in different courtrooms, but it may have been done in a different way, possibly, by Judge Lance Ito because of the fact, Judge Ito, although O.J. Simpson has been acquitted and found not guilty, Judge Ito had him transported back to a facility where he's been held to be released from there. And perhaps one factor in that procedure is the fact that there is a large crowd, predominantly apparently of supporters of O.J. Simpson. And earlier, when they heard what the verdict was, a cry and a shout of triumph, sounding as if, went up. You see it now and you hear it. This is in front of the courthouse. It may well have been that Judge Lance Ito did not want to send O.J. Simpson down in that for reasons that are fairly apparent, that it might have been a situation that might have gotten out of control. I do want to ask, I was asking Tim Chandler before, Tim, is there any standard operating procedure here? Did Judge Ito do something unusual here?
Not particularly unusual because of what I think the circumstances were. Typically, a defendant, once he's been acquitted, has a right to walk out of the courtroom, and I think the law allows that. I had a defendant acquitted. The judge ordered him released. He walked out of the courtroom with me and went down later to take care of his business. However, in this case, as we heard reported earlier, there was some arrangements being made on behalf of O.J. Simpson, and perhaps that's what was being done, because we didn't even hear the lawyers say we want him to go out with us. We just heard a sidebar, and then the judge says take him somewhere and release him.
Art, you're a prosecutor. You're in the Brotherhood of Prosecutors here. First of all, give us your reaction if you feel like it, but also I'd be interested, what do you think this is going to do to Gil Garcetti, who is the district attorney here and may catch a lot of heat over the way this has worked out?
Well, I think first, being a prosecutor and sitting there and taking this kind of verdict, it's probably the depths of dejection from the standpoint of the job that you felt that you did, and I think they had done a very good job with the evidence. They had a lot of evidence, but they had to know that the Furman issue was a real wild card in the entire deck, and of course at this point they're probably convinced that the rest of that information about Furman somehow probably got to that jury. So from their standpoint, there are all kinds of things going through their mind, but it's the worst kind of feeling when you believe that you've done your best and you believe the evidence showed absolutely that the defendant was guilty. Now, with regard to Gil Garcetti, the aftermath of this case obviously has just begun to be played out, and the impact that it's going to have on him as the district attorney it will be certainly an issue, and there'll be a lot of criticism one way or another. I know Gil Garcetti, and I think he's able to withstand that and stand up to that and say he did what he thought was right, and that was to put this evidence in front of this jury, and he put an awful lot of evidence there.
Well, but the criticism may be that he, first of all, tried the case in downtown Los Angeles, whereas we've heard juries tend to be more skeptical of the police. And then they concentrated on picking an all-female jury, or largely females, thinking that the abuse issue was going to be front and center. And some people are going to be critical of the fact that you had 9 African Americans on a jury, which is a far higher percentage than you have African Americans in this community.
Well, all of those kinds of things are going to be looked at, and I think, though, that what he's going to do is go back to the basic plan that they had, and all of those things have done very well for them in other kinds of cases. This is a case that, as it proceeded, nobody knew about the Furman issue, and boom, that becomes the biggest wild card in the whole case. And I think, without a doubt, that's where this case is going to wind up, in the lap of that issue, and everything else that they did. I'm sure they're going to say we did the right thing.
I want to ask Ricky here. Ricky, you thought you caught a hint there in that procedure that maybe Judge Ito was not too happy with the way this came out.
Possible. The reason that that may be possible is the fact that he asked the jurors to be polled. Polling is a device that is used almost exclusively by defense lawyers in a criminal case when a guilty verdict has come in. And the reason for it was explained earlier by both Tim and Art, because sometimes if you're a defense lawyer and you think that one of those jurors may not be too settled in that conviction, or it may be emotional, that maybe you'll get them to switch. I don't think I've ever seen a judge on his own motion poll a jury for a guilty verdict. And I don't know about Art or Tim, but I've never seen it before.
Very unusual. I haven't seen that either. Normally, you know, you want to say that's fine, that's the jury's verdict, we're not going to second guess it, and you know, we're going to be on our way.
And I misspoke, Fred. I did say what I meant to say was it's for a not guilty verdict.
Right.
It's in the guilty verdict stage where the defense wants them polled, and in a not guilty sentence, we all agree. I mean, it was really kind of stunning, and perhaps it's what we all said earlier, that maybe Judge Ito thought if they slept on it overnight, maybe one of them might have changed their minds.
Well, the Monday morning quarterbacking is starting already, and we might as well pitch in. But because I want to ask you, Art Danner, it's easy enough with hindsight to say that the prosecution made a mistake in embracing Mark Furman after they had learned that allegations of racism would be made against him, and after a woman came forward and said, I met him and he did use the infamous N-word. What the prosecution did after knowing that, and after knowing that Kathleen Bell was ready to testify to that, they implied that she was another one of these publicity hunters who was trying to get involved in the case. And they stood by him. Turned out she was right. Should they have perhaps said, wait a minute, and gone and taken her more seriously?
Well, when you look at it now, that certainly could have been an obvious course of action they could have taken. But I think probably what happened, and many times what does happen, is that they went to a witness like that and said, look, you know, we have this evidence that's going to be put online against us. You know, where are you at on that? Where are you at on those issues? And we need to know. And based on the reaction that they had, and they probably went and checked them out with the other people they have in the police department and said, hey, can we depend on this witness or not? And based on those kinds of reactions, they decided to go with them. Now, you know, in hindsight, it doesn't look very good. And in fact, it looks the worst. Because I think that this case became the Furman case, and clearly that was reflected in the verdicts.
Well, actually, it was worse than that, because what you had was you had prosecutors and police officers trying to get to the prosecutors on the case and tell them, look, this guy, he could have done this. Don't put your eggs in this basket. And they went forward.
Yeah.
So now they got bitten by it, and the jury is saying, we're going to send you a message, and now we know what it was.
Well, they did send a message, and there were sweaty palms, not just up here at the Court TV anchor position, but obviously in other places, and I would assume, based on the atmosphere in the courtroom, because to a certain extent it appeared that the situation was almost being milked for heightened suspense before the verdict was finally read. Here's the way that was just a few minutes ago in Judge Lancito's courtroom.
Mr. Robertson.
Superior Court of California, County of Los Angeles, in the matter of the people of the state of California versus Orenthal James Simpson, case number BA097211. We, the jury, in the above entitled action, find the defendant Orenthal James Simpson not a felony upon Nicole Brown Simpson, a human being, as charged in count 1 of the information. Superior Court of the State of California, County of Los Angeles, in the matter of the people of the State of California versus Orenthal James Simpson. We, the jury, in the above entitled action, find the defendant Orenthal James as charged in count 2 of the information. We, the jury, in the above entitled action, further find the special circumstance that the defendant, Orenthal James Simpson, has in this case been convicted of at least one crime of murder of the first degree and one or more crimes of murder of the first or second degree to be not true. Signed this second day of October 1995, Juror 230. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, is this your verdict? So say you one, so say you all.
And that was the scene there in the courtroom. Actually, the scene right after that, in many ways, carried a more of an emotional wallop, predictable embracing and just elation on the defense side of the case, and the prosecution side just obvious, just doom and desolation written all over the faces of the prosecutors. Ricky, I guess in a way this will make the reputations, in the sense that they need to be made, of all those lawyers on the defense side.
Well, certainly of many of them. This has been something that catapulted Barry Scheck into fame and perhaps fortune eventually. Barry Scheck and Peter Neufeld, who are old friends of mine, we've worked together teaching for over 15 years. These are people who, as they say, toiled in the vineyards. These are people who were teachers. Barry Scheck is someone who has taught at the Cardozo Law School. I know he said in court he's taught some 18 years. He was not really known as a trial lawyer. He was often a consultant, though, of course, from time to time in New York, he's had some very significant cases. But now Barry Scheck is of national fame and promise. And if we ever do hear from those jurors, I would bet that it's not only the Furman issue. I would bet that Barry Scheck and his ability to cross-examine Dennis Fung, Andrea Mazzola, and the rest of the experts to possibly create reasonable doubts, as he would say in the plural, was highly significant.
You know, we have two very experienced trial lawyers. This had to be remarkable, just the deliberations. I mean, I hesitate to use the word, but that's what they call it. What do you think happened in that, when they went back into that jury room, Mark?
Well, it just seems like that when they went back into that jury room, that they must have just almost immediately said, look, is there anybody here who doesn't have some type of doubt about this, you know, the whole case? And I mean, are we going to need to go through this entire evidence, or can we really just sit down here and you know, talk about this thing? And it happened very very fast, because I think this was a group who obviously got along well, and clearly the foreperson involved, she had the confidence of all these jurors in a way that it went right down the line.
Yeah, but jurors, don't they usually try to put a good face on it and hang out in the jury room a while and try to make it look good? Tim, I mean, they do that, don't they?
Well, they did it in the William Kennedy Smith case. They got the verdict, and they said, we better wait a little bit so everybody will accept it. And I think maybe in this case they were doing the same thing, to the extent that they waited till the afternoon before and then they had the testimony read back. It seems to me to be just a gut reaction of, don't you have a doubt in here? And it's that old abiding conviction in the pit of your stomach that you it's absent. And I'm not going to make this decision now. I mean, I'm going to quit, and so they did.
Well, go ahead.
I just think that there's something in addition to that. I think, given the circumstance we have, I think this was a message-sending kind of jury. I mean, I think that they wanted this to be very clear, and that's almost why they did it as quickly as they did. You know, and they decided to come down on the side of Johnny Cochran's issues. Send him a message, and that's exactly, I think, what happened.
Yeah. Well, of course, there was a lot more to the defense case than that, although that might have been the pivotal point. We'll know perhaps if the jurors began to talk. But the defense did many, many things, and clearly it was effective. Greg Jarrett's standing by. Greg, what do you think the defense did that was particularly right?
I think I agree with my colleague, Ricky Kleeman. Hiring Barry Scheck and Peter Neufeld was key. Three aspects of the prosecution's case. Domestic violence. I think in the end these jurors said to themselves, this really doesn't mean much. It doesn't tell us O.J. Simpson is a killer. The second part was the timeline, and I think they concluded that proved fuzzy. And so all that remains is the damaging blood evidence, volumes of it. But Barry Scheck neutralized it in a word. Whether or not you agree with what he was saying or not is really almost irrelevant. But he put the blood evidence and the police officers who collected it, all the way down to Andrea Mazzola and Dennis Fung, under a microscope, and he studied their every move. And if you do that thoroughly enough, you know, sometimes you can really create the cracks in the foundation that supports the structure of the prosecution's case. And I think by neutralizing the DNA evidence and those who collected the blood, Barry Scheck is really the real hero here, with one exception. The glove demonstration, I think, hurt prosecutors, and that was the best witness of all for the defense, no witness. And then finally, Detective Mark Furman, who, even if they hadn't called him to the witness stand, I'm convinced that they would have come up with the audio tapes of Furman, and that, of course, ruined the credibility of police. And so if there was a mistake, and it was Furman, it was a mistake that was sown back in 1982 when Mark Furman sued the city of Los Angeles and said, based on my racial views, he was essentially saying, I hate people of color. I'm incompetent to be a police officer. Take me off the force and give me a stress pension. They fought him on that. Back then, in 1982, they should have known that Detective Mark Furman shouldn't be a cop.
Much, Greg, and you'll be standing by, and we'll get back to you as time goes on. I want to serve notice here for those of you who might be interested in the subject we brought up a moment ago. What will be the position of District Attorney Gil Garcetti and his prosecution team? We're told that they are saying that they will have a press conference. It will be, of course, carried live right here on Court TV as soon as it starts, and we will let you know as soon as we think that's about to happen. I want to ask Ricky Kleeman here, though, a question. Here we have a situation in which polls tell us that quite a substantial majority of the American people think O.J. Simpson was guilty, or at least committed these crimes. Now, what do you think the reaction and the outcome is likely to be to this verdict, which cuts the other way, obviously?
Well, I think that one of the problems, which we discussed earlier and we discussed last evening on Primetime Justice, is the difficulty that this jury only deliberated such a short time. And in the process of deliberating only a brief period of time, the critics of the verdict will say that they did not base their verdict on the evidence, that the critics of the verdict may say, well, they were swayed by Johnny Cochran's rhetoric. And that's going to be an unfortunate situation, because those 12 jurors were not all African Americans. You had 2 white people on that jury. You had a Hispanic male on that jury. And obviously, they thought he was not guilty from the get-go, or you couldn't have gotten this verdict.
Okay, now I want to ask you 2 California lawyers. There are proposals already out there. They were out there before this verdict. Here in California, to change the law, first of all, the one that would have been likely to have been approved won't be now, apparently, at least not based on this case. There is a move here to do away with unanimous juries and go to, say, 10-2. If there had been a hung jury, that might have been pushed over. I guess that one is not going to fly either way because of this.
Well, no, I think that one's still alive, although it's certainly been hurt in a sense by, you know, a unanimous not guilty, of course. But I think that there's still a very strong argument, and I think that's going to move to initiative, and I think the people out there in the state of California are going to want to consider that based on economics alone. So I suspect that that's still alive and well.
Well, can you imagine there will be other serious efforts to come up with some sort of legal changes fueled by people who think this verdict was wrong?
Absolutely. I think that the aftermath of this verdict is just going to be very, very significant in terms of the system. I think that the system already, of course, has its critics, and that the most fundamental aspects of this verdict are going to be that this system doesn't work, because I think most people, as you've said, have observed that this evidence, a mountain of evidence, did not persuade these jurors. Now, why? You know, what went wrong here? And we can criticize it in terms of tactics, strategy, etc. But when you look at the evidence, you have to say, like most of the polls do, that it sure pointed to guilt. So what's going to happen is that question fundamentally is going to be the one that gets wrestled with. What do we do with a system that doesn't produce a conviction with this amount of evidence?
Well, Tim, you defense lawyers must be cringing at what might come out of this.
Yeah, it's sort of unfair to the jurors and to the verdict and to the system to actually take the poll in that way, because I don't think the poll is, look, having proved the case, do you believe beyond a reasonable doubt that in fact O.J. Simpson committed this crime? The poll is, well, you know, you can go with strong suspicion, you can go with your belief, you can go with your feeling, you can go with your reaction, and so therefore it's kind of unfair to take the system and now do away with what is fundamentally our basis for a fair trial, and that is unanimous jury of 12 jurors of your peers have to agree before you can be convicted. I think that would be, that's the fundamental, it seemed like an unshakable principle in my lifetime and when I was in law school, that you just couldn't mess with that. And it seems unfair to mess with it because of polling and tabloids and that sort of thing.
Tim, let me interrupt you just for a moment, because I'm being told that what our viewers are seeing now is a white van. And that it is outside the courthouse that's behind us, the criminal court building. We are told that O.J. Simpson is in that, and he is being taken back to this point at which he will be formally released from custody, and that's what our viewers are seeing. But I want to ask Ricky Kleeman. Now, Ricky, it would seem to me that the kinds of changes that the public may ask for are, one, perhaps reduce the power of the legal teams to kind of hand-pick juries, which are, in their view, constructed to come out on the side they wish, and perhaps to do something to prevent lawyers from injecting so-called red herring issues into a case when there's really no showing. I'm told that the procession now is moving. We can't see this as it's being described to me in my ear. It sounds almost eerily like the high-speed chase. And as a matter of fact, we can now see it, and as I see it,
it's like a white Bronco,
yeah,
right?
Yeah,
we're back to this.
Yeah, when I was
right from where we began here.
Yeah, it's a van, but how, you know, it's ironic that I'm sure they didn't. Well, I'm not sure, but I hope they didn't have a sense of irony when they set this up for this departure.
Well, it does have a sense of irony, and of course it is one of the sheriff's vans that is taking Mr. Simpson back to the jail, from which he will be processed and released. And I'm told by lawyers in the Los Angeles area that from the jail itself that sometimes a release process takes about 4 hours. So we'll see if Mr. Simpson gets a little bit of velvet glove treatment and is able to leave a little sooner.
And I want to ask you, Californians, they're not on the freeway there. But it would be almost too great an irony if suddenly they veered down into the freeway, and then without the police chasing, but I would assume escorting. I would assume that's happening. We can't see it. O.J. Simpson now has a different sort of escort.
Back to the Rockingham residence,
yeah.
as it were.
It's just as if we've come from where we started.
Mm-hmm.
There's a great need here, Fred, for security. Of course, the lawyers on both sides of this case have received death threats along the way. As we know, Johnny Cochran has surrounded himself for security with members of the Nation of Islam. And there certainly are times when O.J. Simpson is going to have to be very, very concerned for his safety. As we know, unfortunately, in the society in which we live, that there are people who target celebrity and celebrity in this kind of a context. And I wouldn't be surprised if O.J. Simpson employed security for a while.
I wonder, we were talking about the kind of criticism that may come from the public and the kind of legal change. I don't know what you can do. I don't know what the public or critics can do about it, but I'm sure we're going to
think you're right, and I think your earlier question to me before we all got sidetracked by the van is the reality of the situation where criminal defense lawyers have often talked at their national meetings that if there is an acquittal at this case, that an acquittal in this case will mean reform that will hurt the criminal defendant in the future. And in terms of jury selection, what we're dealing with jury selection is that peremptory challenges, that is, any lawyer on either side of a case can choose to get rid of people without cause. They can just say, I don't want them. And really what the lawyers on both sides are doing, they're not looking for a fair and impartial jury, they're looking for the most partial jury that they can find. I think we're going to hear and see great efforts at jury reform.
All right, again, our viewers, as I understand it, are seeing the van. I was told that the van now is on the freeway. It's not an angle that can reveal itself to be. It is believed that the van is on the way to Men's Central Jail, but in any event, it's a van that, with some irony, is white and is taking O.J. Simpson. We have not seen police escorts, this time different, of course. We should serve notice here that the defense attorneys also are scheduling a press conference. The prosecution has said that it will. We're standing by to cover both for you. To repeat, O.J. Simpson was found not guilty. He was acquitted by the jury this morning. The verdict was read. And we are on the freeway. I'm told that the van is going north on the 101 freeway on the way to Men's Central Jail. And as we've noted several times, with a certain amount of irony, the O.J. Simpson case winds up with a white van bearing O.J. Simpson on the freeway. I want to go back to our California lawyers. Would you think that there would be a successful effort in any way to either deal with the question of the power of the lawyers to pick these juries, or the capacity of lawyers to inject what some would believe to be red herring issues into the case? What do you think, Tim?
Well, I think that would be unfair to the evidence here. I think that, but that doesn't mean that it won't happen, but I just think it would be unfair to the evidence because there are a lot of questions that jurors want answered before they put their stamp of approval on the prosecution's case. And frankly, they just don't want to be the ones to resolve those issues in their mind. And in this case, I mean, we know a lot of the issues that the jury must have had trouble with. And I don't know if we could characterize them all as red herring. Some of them are, I mean, Mark Furman, is he a red herring or is he not? I mean, the problem is that if that jury instruction on circumstantial evidence is read the way the jurors read it here, they're going to go with a different point of view, and reasonableness is to the audience or the beholder. So I do think, though, that your point is correct, that perhaps they'll attempt to tinker with peremptory challenges, because I think that's their most successful area.
Before we hear from our Danner here, this van does contain O.J. Simpson. You have to be curious as to the scene inside that van. Simpson has been acquitted by the jury. We don't know who's in there with him, but we do know that there was obviously some of them are guards. Perhaps he has an attorney with him, but I would imagine that even if it's just O.J. Simpson and the guards, there would be quite a celebration, congratulation going on inside that van as he goes off to the men's jail where he will apparently be released. Art, I didn't give you a chance to have your say about what changes may come.
Well, I think Tim's right. I think there are definitely going to be some changes, and I think he's focused on the area where we might really get an effort, and that is the question of admissibility on issues such as, in this particular case, the Furman issue. And when a judge makes a decision early on, as he did in this case, to allow that kind of questioning, the question has to be asked as to whether or not that's really relevant to this case. Now, obviously, the arguments were heard, the judge made the decision, but in other systems, a judge has, for instance, the power to say, I don't think, viewed against all the evidence in this case, that that's the kind of evidence that'll help this jury decide the case. And I think that you're going to get a lot more arguments like that because of just the seemingly imbalance in terms of a verdict that says not guilty when placed against the context of the evidence in this case.
And, you know, Judge Ito actually ruled at one point in a written ruling that there had been no showing by the defense that Mark Furman had the opportunity to plant a glove. And he was more or less saying, look, Mark Furman may be a racist, and of course he was proven to be not just a racist, but a liar. But the judge was saying, yeah, but he couldn't have planted that glove. Ricky, there would be problems for you, would it not, if the kind of rule that Art Danner is discussing were to be imposed in the United States?
Well, I think, Fred, that there is always a danger of making black-letter law to fit every situation because every case is different. And although, as you say, Judge Ito did at one point say that there was not enough evidence in terms of opportunity that Mark Furman planted the glove, later on it appeared that the defense pushed and pushed and pushed till they could show that there was a space of time where he might have done just that.
I want to tell our viewers that, and we are still seeing the van that's carrying O.J. Simpson to freedom, to his release point. We should tell you that we are being told that very shortly a news conference will begin to be conducted by the prosecutors. We've been told that in the generic sense. Earlier we were told that Gil Garcetti, the district attorney himself, would be part of that. I would rather assume that he would be. He's the person in charge. He now has to bear the burden of facing the public and saying whatever needs to be said in terms of this. I want to ask all of you here, there's another potential event that will take place. There are two civil lawsuits accusing O.J. Simpson of having murdered these two victims, and it's by the estate in one count and the parents in the other case. Now, those cases will now go forward, and Ricky, that could turn out quite differently, could it not?
Oh, of course, because the burden of proof is so much less. In a criminal case, to prove O.J. Simpson guilty, the prosecution had to prove him guilty beyond a reasonable doubt, a very high standard, whereas in a civil lawsuit, the families have to say that he caused a wrongful death by what's called a preponderance of the evidence, which, as is often said, if you had two scales, if you put a feather on one of the scales to weigh it down, then what would happen?
Pardon me. It's the defense attorneys who are having a press conference, and we go live. Haven't started talking yet, and I cut off your thought there, but not only that, but there would be no Furman issue, would there, Ricky Kleeman, in a civil suit for damages?
Oh, I suppose anything is possible about how the defense would defend it, but I would suspect that O.J. Simpson and his lawyers in the wrongful death suit might be well advised to offer a substantial settlement to just stop the litigation, if for no other purpose.
But certainly Fred Goldman would not settle that case.
Well, I think that may be right.
Johnny Cochran's in place. Let's listen.
We're going to start off first just by having everybody introduce themselves, say their name so that you all know who is here, who will be speaking. That will be followed by Ms. Cochran making an introduction, stated by her family. Ms. Cochran will then make another statement, and then we'll have questions, and I'll recognize those people who have questions so that it's not a lot of confusion.
Howard Harris.
Sean Chapman.
Gerald Ullman.
Carl Douglas. Johnny Cochran.
Lee Bailey.
Robert Shapiro.
Bob Blazier, Barry Scheck, and Peter Neufeld.
Shirley Baker.
Jason Simpson.
Arnell Simpson.
Eunice Darrington Simpson.
Carmelita Simpson Durio.
That's it.
Joella Demetrius.
Thank you all very much for coming today. First, I want to thank God for this verdict. He always directs our paths, and he's worthy to be praised. And at the outset, Jason Simpson, the eldest male child of O.J. Simpson, will read a statement from Mr. Simpson and from the family.
I want to echo that. Me and my family want to thank God, without whom I don't know where we'd be. He's truly amazing. A statement from my father. A statement from my father. I'm relieved that this part of the incredible nightmare that occurred on June 12, 1994 is over. My first obligation is to my young children, who will be raised the way that Nicole and I had always planned. My second obligation is to my family and to those friends who never wavered in their support. But when things have settled a bit, I will pursue, as my primary goal in life, the killer or killers who slaughtered Nicole and Mr. Goldman. They are out there somewhere. Whatever it takes to identify them and bring them in, I'll provide somehow. I can only hope that someday, despite every prejudicial thing that has been said about me publicly, both in and out of the courtroom, people will come to understand and believe that I would not, could not, and did not kill anyone. My father will have more to say at a later time.
Thank you, Jason, and from the family. We will take questions. I'll just make a brief statement, then we'll take questions thereafter. On behalf of the entire team, I'd just like to say how grateful we are for this verdict, because we think this verdict bespeaks justice. We never wavered in our faith. We were always optimistic. That optimism proved right. I'd like to just individually thank all of the team members. Everybody on this team played a great part in this victory. There's no question about it. We hung together in the tough times. We always saw this day coming, and now that's here, we feel really good about it. I pay particular tribute today to Joella Demetrius, the lady over my right shoulder, who helped us pick this jury. We lost 10 jurors, but yet we still had 12 who we felt did the right thing. The other two people who aren't present that I'd like to thank are Barry Scheck and Peter Neufeld, who couldn't make it back from New York, but they're in Neufeld's living room today watching this, and we send our love and regards to them. Mr. Simpson, needless to say, is ecstatic, wants to get on with his life, and we are all ecstatic, so we'll take your questions.
Johnny, a lot of people are already saying that this was a case in which race transcended the facts, overcame the facts. Could you comment on that?
Yes, I'm glad you asked that question, Linda. If you watch this trial, if you watch the arguments, then you know this idea of any jury nullification or the idea we didn't have the facts is preposterous. In the opening part of my argument, through a strategy we devised with Lee Bailey, we said that if we could shatter the prosecution's timeline so that O.J. Simpson couldn't have committed this crime, that there would be a reasonable doubt. That's even before we ever got to the socks, the glove, and firm or anything else. So these pundits who make those statements don't know what they're talking about. They haven't tried cases. They don't know what they're talking about. This was a case based upon the evidence. And so that's all we were saying. There was a reasonable doubt. And when you see a trial that lasts 9 months, where the jury takes this period of time, they have gone to what we said. That if you look at that timeline, O.J. Simpson could not, did not, would not have committed this crime. And I think that becomes very clear. So I think that's a very appropriate question.
Johnny, was there a point during the summation, during your closing argument, that you were looking in the eyes of the jury and you knew something, was telling you something, that you were winning?
Well, it's always hard to say, Joe, but I mean, I felt that they were very attentive. For a tired jury, they were very attentive. And then one of the jurors got up and went out, and when she came back, she'd been crying. And I thought that was pretty interesting. And then they all started, a lot of them took notes who hadn't been taking notes before. And I could contrast that with the other arguments. They took a lot of notes, and I felt that was probably important.
Johnny, the jurors went out for 4 hours. Right before this trial, there seemed to be a lot of sadness among the Simpson family. Did you prepare O.J. Simpson for a guilty verdict?
You know, that's a tough question. We never talked about a guilty verdict, and that would have been our fault. But we were so optimistic. We really believed in this case and in O.J. Simpson. And we talked only, even yesterday, when I got back to town last night, I talked to O.J. Simpson last night at 10 o'clock, and he could only talk about going home and seeing his children.
Testimony. When they asked to see the Park testimony, did you think there was a possibility for a guilty verdict?
Well, you know, what we thought was, you know, we've been around a long time, and what we thought was this, that 1 or 2 jurors had a question about the timeline. And I talked to Carl about 5 times yesterday in a row from where I was, and I wanted to know where they stopped, what they heard. They heard, among other things, that Cato Kalin was seen about 10:49, maybe 3 or 4 minutes after those knocks, just like I read in the transcript. It wasn't 10:52 or 10:53 like Marcia wanted to push it back in her timeline. And I felt good about that. So I felt that when you have the rereads are very confusing. You have the rereads, those who have a problem then say, okay, I've heard enough. And they go back in and do their job.
Johnny, this is a question for you, or perhaps one of the members of the family. I wondered what Mr. Simpson is going to do today, now that he's an ex-defendant, where he's going and where he's...
I don't think we can really talk about that because for security concerns, Jeffrey. But he's going to start his life all over again.
And what are his short-term plans, or is he going to stay in Los Angeles? Or
he's going to probably address all these things himself soon.
Yes, Mr. Cochran, you have said publicly that you believe race plays a role in everything. I'd like to know what role race played in this trial.
Well, what I said before, Jim, was that race plays a part of everything in America, and we need to understand that. And then we stop ducking and dodging from that, we'll be better off. Now, basically, in this case, I think that from a standpoint of race, it was introduced by this witness, Furman. This stuff about playing a race card is preposterous. It was malpractice if a man has racist views in a case and a lawyer doesn't pursue that. Anybody who says that doesn't know how to try cases, doesn't know anything about anything. So you have to pursue it because that's your job. So they introduced Furman, and then we dealt with it. But we choose to call it the credibility card. I mean, we pursued his credibility. Do you know that on that jury instruction, a witness willfully false in one material part can be distrusted in others? For all we know, they could have knocked out all of Furman's and Van Adder's testimony. So that's the answer to that. I mean, so I think it became very apparent because they brought him. He was their witness. We didn't call him.
Johnny, in Jason's opening statement, he said that O.J. wanted to pursue the killer or killers in these murders once he gets out. Does he offer any idea or ideas as to who this could be?
I'm sure we'll all talk about that, and I'm sure he has some strong ideas, and we'll be talking about that, and you'll probably hear more about that, Pat, in the days to come.
With all due respect to the attorneys, I'd prefer hearing from some family members, if I may, particularly the women to my right. What was the last 24 hours like for you? Shirley, Carmelita, Arnell, Mrs. Simpson?
We were prayerful.
Yeah.
We were very prayerful, but we were on an emotional roller coaster. And when one would break down, the other ones would come together and lift them up, and then the next one would break down. So we were just all there for each other. But,
well, I was always in prayer. I knew that my son was innocent. And I had the support of so many people all over the world. And I know that prayer of the righteous prevaileth much. And I believed in that. And so therefore, that's why I kept the faith. And I had confidence in his representative. Thank you.
Yesterday was a difficult day, but there was a peacefulness, a calmness for myself, and I know with my other family members. We're a very strong family, and we stick together, and we were very prayerful, and we just knew that no matter what was going to happen, that God was going to take care of us. And we didn't really go one way or the other, but we just knew that God was going to take care of us, and just knowing that we would get through it.
Shirley?
What we knew, when you know that someone is innocent, you are able to hold your head up high, and that's the one thing that our family has tried to do during this whole trial, is to carry ourselves with great dignity and to let the justice system do what it has to do. We knew O.J. was innocent, and we had all the confidence in the world in the team that was put together, and we're just thankful to them, to O.J., to all of you, to all the people that's been so nice to us. We want you guys to know that we really appreciate the way that you have responded to us in the good and bad times, and we want to thank you, thank you, thank you. And now, I just feel, you know, for so many months you've been asking me, how do I feel? And I tell you, I just feel like standing on top of this table and dancing a jig, and I just want to thank you guys.
Yes, Johnny, do you see this verdict returned as any referendum on the LAPD?
No, I don't want to read a lot of things into the verdict. I mean, I think, and I take this opportunity to compliment the district attorney's office. They fought very, very hard. This was a real heck of a trial, believe you me. You saw lawyers go at it on both sides. It's hard to say because we haven't talked to the jurors. I do believe that there were credibility problems with members of the LAPD, some who testified in this case, and I believe that probably has had some effect. And I think we saw some other things too, and I hope that out of this trial, we always look for something positive. I hope that the coroner's office will get their act together. Citizens of LA County should demand that. Hope the LAPD lab will do what's necessary to get up to speed. We deserve better. I hope that the investigators will do better jobs in future cases. Hope they'll abide by the state law. If the state law says call the coroner immediately, call the coroner immediately. Don't wait 10 hours. And I think there's a lot of things we learned in this case.
I'd like to direct this question to Shirley Baker and Arnell Simpson. There are two small children involved in this matter who are currently in the guardianship of a family that believes that O.J. Simpson killed the mother of those children. How are you going to put this family back together?
God, in faith. We got to take it one day at a time. And there's no answers because so much has happened. There's just a lot of mending and healing that needs to take place there. And for me to answer, I can't really answer that question because we just really have to take it one day at a time. But we'll do the best that we can. Well, I don't know. I don't know. When we get to that, we'll deal with it.
I think you should always remember, though, you have two families, the Brown family and the Simpson family, and we are two families, and we have two children that we love, and we're going to do what we can, the very best for the children.
Johnny, I want to ask you what you make of the jury's behavior over the past couple of days, and especially today. They refuse to talk to the lawyers. They don't want to explain their verdict to the public. They came to court today dressed in exercise wear, very casually, after we've seen them for 8 months dressed in suits to come to court. Were they trying to send a message? Were they being contemptuous of the proceedings at all?
I don't think so. I think they knew they were going to go home today, Sally. I think they knew yesterday they had to wait one more day. I think Judge Ito had them all packed, so I'm sure their wonderful clothes that we saw during this trial were all packed away. I think they're a very respectful jury. They were very professional. As all of you reported yesterday, you could not tell on their faces how they had voted. They were very professional. I wasn't here yesterday, and I looked for different things. I could tell today. I could tell today it was going to be all right for us, I felt.
Still try to talk with them?
I would love to, somewhere down the road, talk to them because they've done a really important task here. I would like to do that.
Johnny, there were many yesterday, and no doubt there will be many today, who are concerned about the rapidity with which the jury came to its decision. There are those who say it appears as if it's impossible that they hadn't either reached a determination on their own, as the judges said not to do before they were supposed to, or perhaps had talked to one another, that it seems as if it just is impossible to have reviewed this much material in this short a period of time.
What I think, and maybe some of my colleagues will want to respond to this, what I think is this. When they went out on Friday, you remember that I was at the podium when they had a foreperson already. I think this jury had a sense of whom they respected. And in fact, Tracy Kennedy, one of our former jurors, said last night that they always respected juror number one. And so that probably wasn't a hard decision for them. I believe that based upon having participated in the arguments, that this jury felt the prosecution hadn't proven this case. And when ultimately you talk to them, that's going to be where they came down. If you didn't believe the timeline, if you didn't believe that O.J. Simpson had enough time to commit this crime, that he couldn't go upstairs, change clothes, bathe, throw away all the clothes, the gun, the knife, the weapon, the shoes, and all that stuff, Ms. Clark gave them 5 minutes to do all that. If you think about that reasonably, and then tie that into the circumstantial evidence thing, is that reasonable? I mean, who in America, you get caught up in all these facts, but you got to look at what the law is. So if they made that determination, it didn't take very long. And if one or two people said, well, let's hear what Alan Park has to say on the timing, then you have a verdict.
On the timeline, not on Mark Furman.
Well, I haven't talked to him yet, but I think it may be a combination of both. I don't know.
Johnny, one of the interpretations of this case is going to be that if you are rich in America, you can get a good outcome. But if you are poor, and then the justice system will just run over you. What is your reaction to that?
Well, I'd like to let one of my brother or sisters answer that question. Bobby Blazer, Bob,
It's an interesting concept, and there's a lot of truth to that. That unfortunately, in most places in this country, people who do not have adequate funds cannot properly defend themselves. But it worked both ways in this case. In this case, our small group of lawyers that were put together from June the 14th were up against the most intensive investigation probably in the history of criminal justice. Not only did the Los Angeles Police Department participate in this, the Chicago Police Department, the FBI, Interpol. They brought in DAs from 2 different jurisdictions, as well as 40 to 50 DAs. They had upwards of 100 officers at any one time investigating this case. And if we did not have adequate resources, we wouldn't have been able to come close to present all the crucial evidence that had to be shown. If only this case had proceeded based on a grand jury indictment with no cross-examination, we'd have been in a much more difficult position. So I think all in all, we were in a position where they had enormous resources, we had limited resources, and worked very hard.
I'd like to comment on that. I think no matter how much resources a defendant has, they can never match the resources of the state. And at this very moment, as we talk, Congress is debating cutting the funding of the Legal Services Corporation, eliminating funding for the death penalty centers that provide defense to indigents in death penalty cases. I think rather than talk about what you can achieve with resources, we need to take a long, hard look at how many defendants have to run this gauntlet without resources, and what precautions we have in our system to ensure that they too can achieve justice.
With all the faults that you found with the coroner's office, with the investigators, with the crime lab, with the LAPD, do you expect there to be any kind of ripple effect with people that have already been convicted or whose trial is pending?
Let's maybe Lee Bailey.
I have an idea that a lot of the records in which Mark Furman was a witness are going to be carefully examined, because the claim of fabrication has been laid on him before in civil and criminal cases. Whether or not crime lab cases will be scrutinized, who knows? I can tell you this. When a fellow is sitting in jail and hasn't got a lot to do, he spends a lot of time thinking back about new defects. And so I would expect to see a ripple.
I'm just curious why Mr. Simpson isn't here today. This is his first chance to speak to all of us personally. Why did he choose not to be here?
If he didn't choose that, there are security concerns. Remember, Judge Ito said he couldn't be released from here.
The van, what you were seeing is the van which is carrying O.J. Simpson has just arrived at his home on Rockingham. And he is out of the van, and you see him going back toward his home and into his house. We're told that Al Cowlings was there. So in more ways than one, there was an irony here involved in the return of O.J. Simpson to his home at Rockingham. Now we go back to the press conference of the defense team.
Believes in murder, and our hearts have gone out to these two families from the very beginning. I want to make that as clear as I can. We understand their pain, and somebody asked the question about the Browns and the Simpsons getting together. You've seen some pretty poignant times when Mrs. Eunice Simpson, I think she'll be a catalyst in that healing, a reconciliation between those families. And for the Goldman family, we also share their pain, and we understand. That's one of the things that Mr. Simpson hopes to involve himself in, because he believes the killers or killer are still out there, and he wants to do something about that.
Yeah, please, if could, as many of you as want to, address that same question about the two families and what you can say to them, not what these families will, but what you say to them. They clearly were very upset. Mr. Goldman, as you probably know, mouthed the word murderer when he heard the verdict. He's been very, very harsh on all of you, particularly about the tack that he says that you took. And in particular, I'd like to hear Mr. Shapiro's response to what Mr. Goldman says was a race-based defense.
For a long time, I have been looking for the right opportunity, and I guess there never is the right opportunity, to personally express my condolences to Mr. Goldman and to his family for the horrible murder of his son. I have had the opportunity, fortunately, to express that to the Brown family when I attended the services early on and the funeral. I sat at the end of the council table and was the only lawyer who could see the audience, and our eyes would focus, and the anger that he had and showed was real. And I wanted to reach out and tell him that we did have our sympathies and condolences with him during this.
Hold his press conference, and we will listen. You can see there as they gather, you see that Fred Goldman, the Goldman family, is there. We're told that Gil Garcetti is there, that Marcia Clark is there. You see Christopher Darden. Gil Garcetti is behind the microphone. He is the district attorney of Los Angeles County. You can see that he is checking to see that all of the players are there, and we'll listen.
I'm going to ask everyone who is watching, who's listening to this, to pause for a moment. Remember why we're here. We're here for Ron, we're here for Nicole, and we're here for every other victim of violent crime. Our job is to seek justice. This case was fought as a battle for victims of domestic violence. We hope this verdict does not discourage the victims who are out there throughout our communities, throughout this country, from seeking help. I know there are women especially who are right this very moment living in fear, living in violence. We're asking you to reach out for help. There is new help out there. Think of yourself. Think of the children who are in the house too. Don't wait. If you wait, it could be too late. We are, all of us, profoundly disappointed with the verdict. We want to hear from the jurors before we make any other comments concerning their decision today. But it was clear, at least it is to me, and I think other members of the prosecution team, that this was an emotional trial, and apparently their decision was based on emotion that overcame the reason. Certainly we have received calls and letters from all over the country praising the efforts of the prosecution. This was done no matter what verdict was going to be reached. We had many men and women throughout the country call and thank us for the efforts, many in tears. I am proud of every member of my staff, but there are particular people who made sacrifices. To the Goldmans and to the Browns, we cried with you. We shared energy, and as Chris said, during the most difficult times, we looked at you, and you gave us all strength, tremendous strength. We will never know the loss, really the pain of your loss. We tried as diligently, as hard, as professionally as we could to seek justice in this case. My thanks go to all the law enforcement agencies that assisted us. Los Angeles Police Department, obviously, the FBI, the Chicago Police Department, Department of Justice. But I think most particularly, I still, myself as the district attorney, want to thank the two lead investigators in the case, Phil Van Adder and Tom Lang. Los Angeles should be grateful for the professional job and loyalty that they've given over several decades. There are a couple companies that gave pro bono services to us. Absolutely first class. Decision Quest assisted us with many things. Many of you saw the pyramid. That was their idea. They did all of this. They invested pro bono nearly $1 million their own to help us seek justice. Cognitech also helped us. There were many others who helped. We had restaurants and others who were helping with the staff. I want to thank, too, every member of my office. They helped us. They don't have their name out in front, but they helped us. And more importantly, they helped every day with all the Rons and all the Nicoles that we handle every day. This has been one case. It's been an important case. But literally, we have thousands of these cases. Finally, to our team, to our law clerks, who really worked so hard. These were students in law school who gave up so much to work with us. To the new prosecutors who joined our team, who took and passed the bar and became deputy DAs, and they gave their all. To the support staff from Patty Joe, to everyone else involved, our victim witness people, but certainly to the media relations. Special thanks to Suzanne Childs. Suzanne worked the 7 days a week. As you know, she's a lawyer, former deputy district attorney, as well as a journalist. She made your life, the journalists, easier, made our lives easier too. Our investigators, our Bureau of Investigation, goes unheralded, but they did fabulous work. Especially Gary Schramm and Mike Armstrong and several others. They were there whenever we needed them, whenever the families needed them. They were there. Finally, of course, we have the lawyers that you saw in court. Let me thank them because they did a first-class job. To Bill Hodgman, you know Bill, he managed the unmanageable, but he did it. To Alan Yokelson, to Sherry Lewis, to Hank Goldberg, to Brian Kelberg, to Lisa Kahn, to Rock Harmon, Woody Clark, and Scott Gordon. Every person here gave their all. It was a professional effort seeking justice. We had, I perhaps should give thanks to Woody and Rock's bosses, the district attorneys of San Diego and Alameda County. They helped when we needed the help, and again, it was a first-class effort. Of course, lastly, to to Chris and to Marcia. None of you will ever know the personal sacrifices everyone here made. None of you will know, too, the sacrifices that the families of this team made. They didn't see their husbands or their wives, the fathers and their mothers, for 16 months. I think on behalf of every citizen who has been looking at this case in an objective way, I think they want me to say thank you, and I am saying thank you. And let me end by saying we deserve to be proud of the effort that we made in this case. I am very proud of the total effort made in this case. We stand here in front of you with our heads held high because we did everything professionally possible to seek the justice in this case. I'm going to ask Marcia and then Chris and then Bill if they want to make any comments or thank you. Now would be the appropriate time to do it. We will then, when they finish, address a few of your questions. But I will also add that because we've not had the opportunity to hear from the jury, they've indicated they're not interested in talking to any of the lawyers. Maybe they'll talk to you. We will withhold further comment for the rest of the day. But let me give Marcia an opportunity to say thanks.
I first want to extend my thanks to the families of the victims, to the Goldmans and to the Browns. Their strength, their dignity, and their support throughout this trial have been tremendous, and a tremendous source of inspiration and strength to all of us. My sympathy and my love go out to all of them. And then I'd like to thank the members of our team. You're wonderful. You're wonderful. You've given everything. You've given your all throughout all of it. We couldn't have done any of it without you. You've done a beautiful job. Please don't let this make you lose faith in our system. Please don't let this deter you from doing a job you're so well qualified to do. You're all wonderful. You can make it go right, and you'll have a chance to do it again. And I thank you from the bottom of my heart. And I thank my partners, all of you. You're just fantastic. I can't tell you how fantastic. No one here has spared any effort. Everyone here has put in 110%, given their all for everyone, for justice, for the families of the victims, in the effort to see that the lives of Ron and Nicole were not thrown away. It was a dignified fight. It showed great courage, great integrity, great moral strength. And we have every reason to be proud of every single one of them, and we are. Thank you.
I never expected I would be here in this time and in this place and in this position. If there was anything that ever motivated me throughout the trial, it was the idea or the notion that one day I'd have to turn to the Goldmans and with the realization that he had been acquitted. But that is the verdict. That's the jury's position. That's their voice. And I accept that verdict. We came here in search of justice. You will have to be the judges, I expect, as to whether or not any of us found it today. But I'm not bitter, and I'm not angry. But I'd also like to thank the lawyers on our prosecution team. I am honored to have.
And please give us a moment. I guess I've always been referred to as the calm one, but it is very it's very difficult for any of us to speak without great emotion today. The verdict comes as a great disappointment, and I want to tell everyone here, I want to tell everyone in this county, and I want to tell everyone in this country that you can be proud to the hilt of the effort made by the prosecution team in this case. This was a classic team effort. None of us, take all the credit, and all of us share in the disappointing verdict today. I've been involved in a number of long or epic trials over time, and I have never seen anyone work so hard in behalf of the people as the team that we had in this case, and that goes from investigator to law clerk to stand-up attorney in the courtroom to research attorney. Every single person here on this team sacrificed greatly to try to bring the Browns and the Goldmans justice, and to bring justice to the county and for everyone. We won't forget Ron and Nicole. We won't forget them ever. And we may have to carry on the fight in their names in a different way after this. But for the Browns and the Goldmans, we're not going to give up. And for Ron and Nicole, we'll never forget you, ever. Thank you.
Let me, if I might, just to clear the record too, I left out a couple thank yous. Daryl Mavis, thanks Daryl. And certainly to my executive staff, my chief deputy, Sandy Buttigia, and Frank Sunstead, the entire staff. I mean, this truly was a team effort. And I said one last time before you take your questions, I've been in the office 27 years. I am extremely proud, and every citizen in this county, perhaps even this country, should be proud of the professional effort that was made here. We'll take a few of your questions.
Is the Simpson matter over, or would you consider any possible federal charges, and are there any?
It's over from our viewpoint.
So, Garcetti, is this investigation now going to be reopened from square one, the whole murder investigation?
Are you talking about this case?
We're going to find the killer?
The lights just went out. I stand in front of you. We all stand in front of you with the belief that the evidence was there. This was not, in our opinion, a close case.
Gil, can we hear from Fred Goldman about whether or not he's determined...
The Goldmans are not going to be speaking.
You said apparently that this was a verdict based on emotion. I just wanted to see if you could elaborate on that.
I couldn't hear you.
You said that this was a verdict apparently based on emotion. Why do you believe that? Was the swiftest at which it came in?
Well, we have less than 3 hours deliberation after, what, almost 9 months worth of evidence? I don't know. I said I haven't had the opportunity to discuss it with the jury, so I don't know.
You've done your best. You've had a huge amount of effort and time expended on this, and yet there are people out there in the streets all over Los Angeles cheering for O.J. Simpson. Why is that?
I'm not a psychologist. I can't answer that. I think you probably have more people who are profoundly disappointed with the result. Chris?
Is there one point in this trial that you think was a pivotal kind of turning point, one way or another, that was particularly the moment in the whole trial?
I don't think so, is it? I mean...
Just to follow up on Kareem's question, considering the swiftness of this verdict after 8 months of testimony, is this a legitimate verdict?
Is this a legitimate verdict? Call it whatever you want. It's the verdict. And I'm not going to put any adjective in front of the verdict. It's a verdict.
Do you think historians will look back on it and consider a nullification verdict?
Well, certainly there are going to be many people who look at this, that this was, in fact, jury nullification.
You know, all along you said that you had a mountain of evidence. What does this tell you about justice?
Give us a chance to reflect. I mean, this is... I don't know how, if you can really appreciate the profound disappointment that we're all feeling. Had this been a close case, all right. But you have professionals up here. We're surrounded by professionals. Every person here has tried so many cases, difficult cases, and very thin cases that we refer to them, where you don't know what the jury is going to do because it's very close in the way of evidence. In our professional judgment, it was overwhelming evidence. We still believe in the evidence in the case.
Given the reactions, different reactions within the city, how do you not lose faith in the system when you have so many people who feel one way about this and so many people feeling the other way?
Give me an opportunity to reflect on this before I'll take one more question.
The ugly truth really at this point, though, that this whole case did cut on race in the end.
Before I have an opportunity to hear what you learned from the jurors, I'm not going to respond to that. I mean, you have to understand that there is profound disappointment, but I have to admit to you that there's, unlike Chris, I have a little anger too. And so I'd rather just be a little more reflective here before I do it.
At all that this kind of verdict, there are people out there who are not cheering as well. Do you think that this kind of verdict or this verdict will have some impact on people's faith in the system?
I didn't just fall off the back end of the turnip truck. And when you ask, are there people who are going to be doubting the criminal justice system? Of course there are going to be people who are going to be doubting the criminal justice system. But let me emphasize one thing. We've heard it time and again, but this case is not the usual case. Don't look at this case as being really how most cases are handled, or how most juries, or how most judges, or how most everyone who's involved in the process deal with the case. That's not the case. The jurors do the right thing, nearly all the time. That's it, folks. Thank you.
Wanting to talk to you. When do you think you can talk to them? Please.
I only have a few things to say. I want to thank, on behalf of my family, of all decent, law-abiding citizens in this country and nation, Marcia Clark, Chris Darden, Bill Hodgman, Gil Garcetti, I'll forget names, I'm sorry, quick help. Everybody, every single person in this DA's office. Until the other day, I had, honest to God, no clue how many people in this office had worked day and night for a year toward one goal, and that's justice. And to each and every single one of them, our profound thank you and blessings. Not to forget Mark, our victim's advocate backbone. This prosecution team didn't lose today. I deeply believe that this country lost today. Justice was not served. I and my family will do everything in our power to bring about the kind of change that won't allow what happened today to ever happen to another family again. In closing, I only have one other thing to say, because I don't want to forget. I forget a lot of things. To my wife, Patty. To my daughter, Kim. To Michael and Lauren and Brian. My other kids. To all of our deep, close friends. Who have been there for us for this year and 4 months or 5 or whatever it's been. Who have helped us daily get through each day. We'll never be able to say thank you enough. I will forever be proud of my son and my family. Thank you.
Thank you all.
And we've seen tears from, obviously, the family member, Fred Goldman, the father of Ron Goldman. He added something that probably many of you suspected, but I believe it's the first time he said this publicly, and that is that he apparently will take some sort of a public role in working toward legal changes that he thinks might be desirable in order, as he put it, to assure that this sort of thing will not happen to another family again. Tears from Chris Darden, a prosecutor whose emotions are always rather close to the surface, and a triumphant and quite satisfied, obviously, naturally, predictably, press conference from the defense side at which Jason Simpson, son of O.J. Simpson, read a statement from his father, which, of course, is the first statement thus far that we've heard from him. Here is what Jason Simpson read as the expressions of his father's belief at this point. Here he is.
I'm relieved that this part of the incredible nightmare that occurred on June 12, 1994 is over. My first obligation is to my young children, who will be raised the way that Nicole and I had always planned. My second obligation is to my family and to those friends who never wavered in their support. But when things have settled a bit, I will pursue, as my primary goal in life, the killer or killers who slaughtered Nicole and Mr. Goldman. They are out there somewhere. Whatever it takes to identify them and bring them in, I'll provide somehow. I can only hope that someday, despite every prejudicial thing that has been said about me publicly, both in and out of the courtroom, people will come to understand and believe that I would not, could not, and did not kill anyone. My father will have more to say at a later time.
O.J. Simpson beginning, predictably, to undertake an effort to restore his standing, his reputation. Several days ago, attorneys for O.J. Simpson trademarked or applied for a trademark for the initials O.J. And it was said to have been part of an effort, perhaps, for O.J. Simpson to restore his finances in the wake of this acquittal. Some have estimated that he may be able to make as much as $10 million from perhaps writing another book from the sale of various artifacts. But there is a cloud on the horizon as far as that's concerned, and in the form of a civil suit, or 2 civil suits that have been filed against him. Kristen Jeanette Myers of Court TV is standing by with some information on that. Kristen?
Yes, well, Fred, first of all, what's interesting about what we just heard from O.J. Simpson's statement was Jason Simpson saying his father would have more to say at a later date. Now, there have been allegations that O.J. Simpson is planning to do a pay-per-view special interview where people are charged and they pay money to hear his interview. And if that is the case, if he does have an agent brokering that deal, then it is unlikely we will hear from O.J. Simpson. Now, in addition, we heard about possible problems down the road in that press conference when Carl Douglas acknowledged the fact that there are, in fact, 3 outstanding lawsuits that O.J. Simpson is likely going to have to deal with.
The Brown and Goldman families are pursuing wrongful death suits against Mr. Simpson. Can you give us any idea of what those proceedings may be like, and will any members of the current defense team be involved in defending Mr. Simpson?
Our office is currently representing Mr. Simpson in 3 separate matters. One filed by Mr. Goldman's natural mother, Sharon Rufo. Another lawsuit filed by Fred Goldman on behalf of his son, and a 3rd lawsuit filed by Louis Brown. Those suits are still in its infancy. There has been basically an agreement by all parties to withhold the propounding of discovery, the taking of depositions, and other matters that are more common in a civil case until the conclusion of this particular matter. I hope that given the results of this case, there will be a re-examination by the plaintiffs exploring the wisdom of continuing the lawsuit in its present forms.
We're going to take one more question. Fred, I don't know if we're going to see that, at least not on the part of 2 parties that have filed lawsuits, the Goldman family and the biological mother of Ronald Goldman. And something that we must correct about what Carl Douglas said, actually, he did misspeak, and this was something that the attorney for the Brown family, Gloria Allred, was trying to make clear this morning in the hallway. Lou Brown has not filed a wrongful death suit against O.J. Simpson. Instead, the estate of Nicole Brown has filed what's called a survival action against O.J. Simpson. Now, the beneficiaries of Nicole Brown's estate are, of course, the children, Sidney and Justin. And you may say it's splitting hairs to say, well, it's not the Brown family, it's Nicole's estate that's suing. But in fact, that's a legal position they've taken, and it may well be for the reason that there is an interest they all have in having harmony within the family, and we saw that at the press conference because of the children, and yet the estate of Nicole Brown is suing on behalf of the children to get money from O.J. Simpson, accusing him of killing these 2 people.
Then there was a lengthy defense news conference there. Court TV cut away from the latter part of it in order to cover the Gil Garcetti prosecutor's news conference. So fill us in here. What was the general thrust that the defense is taking now?
It was interesting. There was quite a bit of posturing going on, I think, with the attorneys, and that's to be expected. Johnny Cochran did most of the talking, but he also went out of his way to encourage other people to ask questions and encourage questions to be asked of other people. No great surprise when a question was directly addressed to Robert Shapiro. The question was about his position on the issue of race, and that's because it has been reported, and we've talked about it a lot on Court TV, the fact that Robert Shapiro is at odds with members of the defense team regarding the way the race card was played in this case. And what Shapiro said was he had been looking for the right opportunity to express his condolences to the Goldmans, and he talked about sitting at the end of the counsel table where he sat during the trial and having to look straight in the face of Fred Goldman and how he saw their pain and their anger. He acknowledged he has always been of a different opinion about race and its purposefulness in this trial, different from the other attorneys. He says, I've always said race was not and should not be an issue, but credibility is an issue. And then he said he might go into that in greater depth at a later time. Now, something else I have to tell you is, as he was leaving the courthouse, and he did hurry out before the rest of the team members left, he is going to do an interview with Barbara Walters of ABC. And it is expected at that time he will more fully flesh out these views that he tantalized us with, I guess you could say, at the press conference, because I think it's clear that he is going to distance himself in some respects from the defense team in this case, the choices they have made, even though they are now, arguably today, at least in a legal sense, the winning team.
Kristen, thank you very much for that report. We'll let you go for now so you can continue to cover the events that are unfolding here in the wake of the acquittal of O.J. Simpson by the jury here in Los Angeles. Court TV will take a commercial break at this point, but we'll come back and we'll continue with our coverage after these messages.
Some days I get these really pounding headaches. I used to take Tylenol, but it didn't always get rid of all the pain. So I've been using Advil for a while now. I found that on my tough headaches, 2 Advil work better than 2 extra-strength Tylenol tablets, better than Tylenol gel caps. And you know, nothing's been proven to last longer than Advil. For my tough headaches, Advil just works better. Advil, advanced medicine for pain.
And for the sinus congestion that can come during allergy season, try Advil Cold and Sinus.
I just love it when I find something that makes baking so much easier. It's Crisco sticks. They're easy to measure. And you keep them in the cupboard, so they're always soft and much easier to blend than butter. They come with lots of great recipes. Like Crisco's Ultimate Chocolate Chip Cookie. It bakes up higher than Toll House cookies made with butter. Stays moister, too. Crisco sticks have butter beat.
For soft, moist cookies, cooks who know. Trust Crisco.
The internet has become a new hunting ground for a secret network of serial killers, and one female FBI agent knows how to stop them for good. Watch Me. The heart-stopping new thriller by A.J. Holt. Watch Me. You won't be able to look away. Watch Me.
America, you're having too much fun with this instant cream of wheat thing. Becky added berries, and it bloomed, and Billy had a ball with maple syrup. Yum! Hot cereal's supposed to be boring, but with cream of wheat, anything goes in an instant.
How far do you have to go for great tasting water? As far as your faucet. The Brita water filtration pitcher has the special Brita filter that reduces chlorine flavor, lead, the things nature never intended. And the taste? Wonderful. Brita. Tap into great taste. Available at Walgreens drugstores and True Value.
I used to think that panty liner protection was a contradiction in terms. Then I tried Always panty liners with wings. They have better panty protection at the sides because they cover more than regular liners. Always panty liners with wings. More panty liner, more protection.
You see, this mouth is working up a hunger.
Why not build your own $1.99 meal at Long John Silver's?
I'm a do-it-yourselfer.
Choose batter-dipped fish, chicken, or shrimp. Then add 2 more favorites.
Build your own.
And amaze your mouth at Long John Silver's.
Want an easier way to get rid of soap scum? Better call your Rain Soft water treatment dealer today.
Going back to basics, living simple as can be.
Glade Basics has natural extracts for pure, clean, simple freshness.
Just one fresh and clean, I'm living basically.
Available in plug-ins, refills, and spray.
Going back to basics, to what means the most to me. Going back to simple, I'm living basically.
Glade Basics, fresh from Glade. S.C. Johnson Wax.
Not just any drain opener can bust through a tough clog like this. You need one with maximum power. New Drano Max. It's the thickest, with 35% more power than even pro-strength liquids. A maximum breakthrough against your toughest clogs. Get new Trano Max and go with the flow. S.C. Johnson Wax.
Superior Court of California, County of Los Angeles, in the matter of the people of the state of California versus Orenthal James Simpson, case number BA097211. We, the jury, in the above entitled action, find the defendant Orenthal James Simpson not guilty of the crime of murder in violation of Penal Code Section 187A, a felony upon Nicole Brown Simpson, a human being, as charged in count 1 of the information. Superior Court of the State of California, County of Los Angeles, in the matter of the people of the State of California versus Orenthal James Simpson. We, the jury, in the above entitled action, find the defendant Orenthal being as charged in count 2 of the information. We, the jury, in the above entitled action, further find the special circumstance that the defendant, Orenthal James Simpson, has in this case been convicted of at least one crime of murder of the first degree and one or more crimes of murder of the first or second degree to be not true. Signed this second day of October 1995, Juror 230. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, is this your verdict? So say you one, so say you all.
Now, in reaction to that acquittal of their client, the defense team held an obviously and deservedly so satisfied news conference. Court TV presented a good bit of that to you as it happened. We then switched over to